Таны төлөө эх орн чинь юу хийж чадах вэ гэж асуухаас өмнө та өөрөө эх орныхон төлөө юу хийж чадах вэ гэж асуу. Ян Фэжерал.
Сайн байцгаана хүнд үзэгчдээ. Манай өнөөдрийн defacto нэвтрүүлгээр бизнес компанид ажилладаг худалдаа маркетинг хариуцсан дэд захирал Spiro Deligiannis гэж хүн оролцож байна. Thank you very much for coming to our show.
Well, thank you for having me.
We'd like to discuss about airline business in this country. And since you have been working quite for some time here, it's very interesting to hear from you. But before that, I would like to ask you a bit about why you have decided to work in airline business.
I started out on the airline business, ironically, not because I like flying. My education was always in mathematics. I wanted to become a mathematician. Mm-hmm. And the airline business is one that caters itself to optimizing, whether it be flights, crews. People complain about lost baggage and food, but in terms of trying to organize that, logistically, as a mathematician, it's a very intriguing problem. So because of my education being in engineering and as well as an MBA student, all my case studies were in the airline industry. So to me, it's something as a mathematical, intellectual pursuit. It's something that you can never find the optimal solution. You can always improve in terms of better schedules for passengers, better timings, better connections. It's a very stimulating and rewarding profession.
You have been graduating from University of Illinois near Chicago and doing your master's there.
Yes, I'm originally from Chicago. My education is in engineering. As an undergraduate, it was applied mathematics. And as a graduate student, it was in my undergraduate, it was more or less theoretical mathematics. And then as a graduate student, it became more applied mathematics. And I was doing all the engineering at the same time, because part of me wanted to figure out how a plane could fly. As a child, I was always fascinated how something that big could get up in the air and fly.
Did you figure it out?
Actually, I did it. As an undergraduate, we took all the courses, and I actually understand the physics behind it. But in terms of how I progressed into the airline industry was more so, as I said before, as an intellectual stimulating challenge.
And you have joined United Airlines.
Yes.
Quite for some time.
I worked for United Airlines for 12 years, 4 of them back in Chicago, working in revenue management. That's the department that sets the fares and the number of seats at each fare level. And then for 8 years in Hong Kong in various roles.
Is United Airlines is now the largest one in the world?
Yes, ironically, when I used to work for United 10 years ago, when I first came out to Asia, it was the world's largest airline, and now with the merger with Continental Airlines, it is again the world's largest airline.
Is it almost like that time, remember, Pan Am?
The airlines today are much, much larger than the old days of what Pan Am was and what TWA was.
Yes.
Just because there's so many more airports, so many different airplane types, larger airplane types, and generally, Jergo's hiking, just a lot more people flying.
On the other hand, this competition is so severe that they have to make altogether either alliance or get merged, no?
Yeah, the competition is, the market is now so fragmented in so many different ways in terms of you have the high-end flyers who went first in business class, and now the luxury items that come with that in terms of lounge access, their frequent flyer points, things of that nature. Then you have passengers at the end of the spectrum who are just looking for the lowest fare, the cheapest fare. So there's a lot more competition, a lot more different types of passengers flying. Because in the old days, it was really very, very expensive to fly. And part of what you just said now with the alliances have come about from a two-pronged approach. Partly it's because of competition, but also because of government regulations. The airline industry tends to be one of the most overly regulated industries on a worldwide basis. And because most countries have ownership stipulations and requirements, there's limited access that some carriers can get outside of their home market. So to compensate for their ability to merge and to buy a carrier from another market that's outside of their home country, that's how alliances are formed.
What is that open skies policy that changed the industry completely? What is that about?
So as an example of how the airline industry is really over-regulated, currently many of the bilateral agreements between countries A and B are regulated by a conference that was held in Chicago in 1949.
Okay. That long ago.
Over 60 years.
60 years.
60 years ago. And it made sense in post-World War II, especially amongst Western Europe, the United States, North America, Canada, amongst the Western countries. However, the world's changed dramatically in the last 60 years. And now there's more of a trend going towards open skies, whereas open skies, instead of the current situation with bilateral treaties where a carrier from country A can fly to country B with so many frequencies a week, so many seats a week, etc. Open skies allow carriers from both countries to fly to each other's markets without any stipulations in terms of how many times a week you fly, how many seats, things of that nature.
I'm a passenger of premier class of United Airlines, this mileage terms. Who had invented this idea of mileage?
So the loyalty programs, which now are very common, not only amongst airlines, but if you think about a lot of other industries, you can go to restaurants, you can go to your favorite shops and be a member of them and have their own loyalty. The loyalty programs actually started in the 80s at American Airlines. The CEO's name at the time was Bob Crandall.
At that time it was largest airlines.
That's a good question. The 80s, I can't, because again, it all depends what you mean by largest. Some definitions are the most passengers, some are the most number of planes, some are the most passenger miles flown.
Who is that number in terms of planes today?
In terms of, well, that's a very good question. I couldn't tell you.
Korean Air?
I don't think it's Korean. It's probably still one of the U.S. carriers, only because they have so many more domestic flights.
Okay.
To give you an example, when I was in Hong Kong, the one interesting statistic is as large as Cathay Pacific is, which is a very, very large carrier in and of itself, the number of flights that Cathay Pacific has in one day is still not equivalent to the number of flights that United Airlines used to have in, the number of flights that Cathay has in 1 week is not equivalent to the number of flights that United Airlines had in 1 day.
1 day.
So the Asian carriers, as large as they tend to be in this part of the world, and they do have the larger aircraft, be it the 747s or the A340s, and a lot of them are now getting the larger A380s. In terms of the overall number of planes and the overall number of passengers they fly, they're still not part of the world's largest. They tend to be the American carriers.
Yet United Airlines was almost on the verge of a bankruptcy a few years ago.
Yeah, which was due to several factors.
Yes. September 11, decrease of market.
Right. Part of it was because of 9/11 and everything that happened. There were 4 aircraft involved in 9/11. 2 of them were from United and 2 of them were from American. Part of the other things that happened with United in terms of the management and the relationships that it had with the unions, it was always a very tense relationship. And when worse came, after 9/11 happened and then SARS and things like the tsunami, those things kind of heightened in terms of the tension between management and the unions. And that was eventually kind of like the downfall of United in terms of it going to a Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection process. But it's since come out of it.
Before we go to Mongolian aspect of our question, United Airlines is flying over Mongolia, right, to Chicago?
Yes, many of the polar routes, be it from Chicago to Hong Kong, Chicago to Beijing, the overfly rights, yes, it's much
over
faster.
Territory of Mongolia it goes as well.
Yes, especially from Chicago to Hong Kong. It flies the polar route. It goes straight north through Canada, more or less over the North Pole, down through Siberia, through Mongolia, down to Hong Kong.
And that understand over Pacific or polar. Over polar one is certain in terms of time, shorter.
Yes, it's ironically, sometimes it is shorter, sometimes it isn't, but what it really saves is on fuel. If a plane comes from North America heading to Asia, it's flying directly into the headwinds.
I see.
So when it flies directly into the headwinds, it burns up a lot more fuel, and the planes are unable to take as many passengers. By flying the polar route, you avoid all the headwinds. So with the same amount of fuel, the airplane is able to carry a lot more passengers, a lot more cargo, as well as hand luggage and personal baggage.
Okay, with this talking, there was an idea before, I think it still is, Mongolia could be a good hub for transport, air transport between Asia and North America. If we, say, do have facilities better than other countries, and we have a less regulation and a faster movement, faster service, is it realistic?
Yes and no. Part of what you need for a hub is just a large population base, and specifically a large amount of business traffic. Now, Mongolia has neither one at this point. With 2.7 million people, and the business traffic, even though it will grow in the years to come, it's not going to create that critical mass that's required. So that's the part that's no in terms of Mongolia becoming a hub in that sense, in the traditional sense of hub. However, because of its geography, as we were just talking about before, in terms of how far north it is, and the need for North American carriers as well as Asian carriers to use the polar routes, especially even Singapore Airlines and Thai, when they fly from New York. You know, Singapore Airlines flies from JFK to Singapore. Again, that's another polar route. The plane comes directly over Mongolia. The geography of Mongolia uniquely allows it to, I think there's definitely a potential here to develop a cargo logistics hub that would facilitate the transportation of cargo to and from Southeast Asia, even back over to Europe, from Siberia down to China, as well as from North America, and then eventually down into the secondary cities of China. So something like a cargo logistics hub, I think that is definitely a possibility here for Mongolia.
Is it anything that an airline is aiming at here in Mongolia?
I don't think here, I can't say what the plans are of all airlines. I know what Easiness would like to do, but in terms of foreign carriers, I think Mongolia is a destination now that's just only coming to the forefront.
Okay.
I think it's there in the minds of probably Korean and ASEAN and Jalan on the Pan, and then Chinese carriers as well too. But carriers that are not from the surrounding countries, I think they're only beginning to be aware of what Mongolia is like. It's really going to necessitate something like Federal Express, UPS, these cargo type carriers, kind of building the infrastructure here. And it's also going to, it's in one sense too, on the commercial side, you know, you're going to need the carriers looking at Mongolia, but yet on the political side, on the government side, the government would need to take a proactive measure here in terms of, for instance, with the new airport that will be built here in the next couple of years, building a facility that will facilitate cargo logistics transportation hub.
So it's still to go a lot to have these facilities.
Yeah, I think the facilities would need to be here first before the carriers would come.
Anyway, we'll go again to that. Before that, what are you doing here in Mongolia?
So I've been here now with Easiness for 2 years. I came in 2008. I first came to Mongolia in 2003, 4, and 5 when I was working for United Airlines. One of the sales roles that I had after 9/11 was going to all the countries in Asia Pacific that United did not have an office to, and opening up an office there. So I opened up the office in Vietnam, in Nepal, as well as Mongolia. And to give you an example, you might say, well, you know, United Airlines doesn't fly to Mongolia. Why do they need an office here? The best example that I can give you is that somebody from Ulaanbaatar, let's say, for instance, flies Korean to Incheon and then over to San Francisco.
Yes.
However, once they get to San Francisco, they may want to go to Las Vegas. They may want to go somewhere to Orlando, to Disney World. They need to fly a U.S. domestic airline.
Yes.
So United would have an office here in terms of facilitating that and selling those tickets for domestic travel.